Hi. So my question is, out of all the stories you guys have come up with for Transformers, are they all necessarily intended for Transformers? Or do you find you come up with good stories that could apply just as well to G.I. Joe or any other universe, and then apply them to Transformers?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there's an argument that almost by definition a good Transformers story is one that you couldn't tell
anywhere else.
Yeah, not 100% the same, you know. So, and Flint was talking before about the rule of thirds, really, and the composite part of a good story, and maybe then the Transformers specific equivalent has a third which says, you know, you couldn't just transpose this, you couldn't just make it a G.I. Joe story, or whatever. I mean, that said, there's been a couple of, I mean, when there's sort of high concept science fiction stuff, the concept itself could be like the charisma parasites. You know, that could crop up in Star Trek or Doctor Who. The plot would unfold in a different way because you're dealing with, it would be different people would experience that villain or those monsters in a different way. There was a Doctor Who story called Blink by Stephen Moffat. So, you know, for those, anyway, it was these quantum enemies that they could only move if you weren't looking at them. And he said, you know, that's a movie that's worthy of a film.
Was that the Angels?
The Weeping Angels.
The Weeping Angels. Yeah, that was incredible stuff.
Exactly right. And he was saying, you know, really there was a huge part of him that wanted to sort of save that for a film, you know. But then we put it into a 45-minute episode of a TV show. And the fact that the Doctor was in it to an extent, whatever, and the TARDIS, you know, changed the contours of the story. I say that because really, if you're locked into a project really, and you have a really strong idea, provided it gels with or meshes with or it plays to the strengths of the existing characters or concepts, then you should put it in there, I think.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
It was interesting. I mean, when I was working on this stuff, I was working on G.I. Joe at the exact same moment, and I found that because I was doing Transformers and G.I. Joe, I dialed it so extreme to my G.I. Joe stories were things you couldn't do in Transformers. I mean, I realized at the end of the day, they were romances. I mean, if you look at them, they're, the Games Master, Skeletons in the Closet, most of you probably don't know what these are, and Ode to Cobra, were all romance stories because you couldn't do that in Transformers. Transformers, I remember thinking, I had to really look into what it's like, what? Yeah, I mean, we're good. But whereas, with Transformers, I remember always wanting to get into the idea of what would it feel like to be one of these things. And, and I remember just doing this massive thought experiment of what it would feel like to, I can turn into a car and all that. And there was no way to produce that or make anything with it, but I tended to want to think more, of the reality of that world, and really, what you need is you need energy to keep going, and you need to keep hiding. Then you have to create a world where they have to hide. Mm-hmm. That's the world building of it is the intrinsic to the principle of the first two seasons. Mm-hmm. Season 3, the reality of the toys meant we had to have a totally different approach. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning, it's like, well, why do you have to look like a Volkswagen Bug and hide out as a bug? And that tells you a lot about what they perceive their environment as being, and that is humans are dangerous. Which was one thing Michael Bay got right, by the way.
Thank you so much.